This is a true story that happened to me while me and some family members went to Lost Lake. During the year of 2002, my uncle called my father and asked if any of our family members wanted to go barbecue at Lost Lake with them. My father has agreed to meet them at Lost Lake at 9 a.m. on Sunday. The weekend has come, and our family is headed to the lake. We got there around 9:30 a.m. and everyone showed up around 10 a.m. There were 4 families total, and the kids were excited to go swim while my dad and my uncle were preparing a floater boat. The boat was a 3-person boat. The woman cooked us dinner, and after eating, we loaded the boat into the water, and off we went. I was 17 years old at the time, and boating with my dad and uncle was fun. While being in the middle of the big lake, all of a sudden, everything went very quiet. We noticed that the water around us has become very still, and there are no leaves or debris around us, just crystal clear. We just shrugged it off and continued our conversation. All of a sudden, our paddle hit something hard, and it was at my side of the boat. I looked over and saw a big fallen tree just floating in the middle of the lake. I yelled at my father and uncle, and they turned the boat around and saw what I saw. My uncle told my dad that a big fallen tree doesn't float like this. That thing was as big as a couch or sofa. It was huge. We look at that fallen tree for a good 1 minute, and then my dad says, "Look, there's a watch that is stuck to the tree." As my uncle pulled that watch out of the fallen tree, and to our horror, that thing moved. As it moved, we can now clearly see that it's not a fallen tree. It has scales like fish scales, and that thing is giant. It swims across us, and that thing is very long. As our boat shook, we were all holding on to each other and shocked. I was about to cry when it finally swam away. My uncle and my dad looked straight at me and said, "Son, don't look back." Then we quickly paddled the boat away and finally got to land. We got out as quickly as possible. As we packed our belongings to leave the lake, my father told me not to say anything to anyone. The next day, my dad told me to come into his bedroom for a talk. My dad told me that it was a good thing that I didn't look back when we were in the boat. He then told me that my dad and uncle saw that things' heads pop out of the water, and that it had very big horns on its head, and those eyes that my dad will never forget. It has big scales and sharp, sticking out teeth. That was the most scary thing that has ever happened to us. Please let us know in the comments below if anyone ever experiences anything like that. My father and I went fishing at a lake in California when I was 12 years old. For the safety of all people, I will not mention the exact location. Back in 1998, my dad and I would always go fishing on the weekend. We would drive up to the mountain, and to get to our exact spot, we would have to drive an hour on a dirt road. One weekend, my father and I drove to our fishing spot and started getting our gear ready. I saw my dad pull out and show me his new lure bait. He said it's very expensive and he cannot wait to try it. He told me that he had been saving up for it. We fished for an hour and nothing was touched, so my dad told me to keep an eye on his pole while he went to grab some firewood and prepare lunch for us. As he walked away, something hit his pole really hard and went flying, but luckily I caught it, but it was so strong that it dragged me all the way to the water. My dad ran all the way to help. All of a sudden, a big splash. Then it stopped. The water splash was so high that me and my dad got all wet. When my father tried to pull the line back, it was stuck. My dad yelled out and said, "Oh no, not the expensive one." He then told me to stay here because he didn't want to lose his lure and was going underwater to get it. I was so worried because of the big splash of water that just happened. And as a kid I was thinking, what if it's not a fish? What if it's a gator or something? My dad then walked to the car to grab his goggles and take off his shirt, then went. He grabbed his line and followed it to where it got stuck as he went underwater. He came back up and took another deep breath before going on again. According to my dad, it was at least 10 feet deep. Finally, he got out of the water and didn't say anything to me. I saw that he was shaking very badly and thought that the water was not even cold. "Son, let's pack up and go," he said softly. I asked him why, that we had just arrived, but he said he wasn't feeling well. So we packed up. While driving back home, I was so confused because we had come this far and were suddenly leaving. He's not normally this quiet and still shaken, but as a 12-year-old I didn't think much of it. When we got home, he went straight for a shower and then slept. The next morning, he couldn't get up and felt really weak, so my mom had to call off work to stay with my dad. 2 days later, coming back from school, I still remember seeing my dad still sleeping on the bed and couldn't get up. So my grandpa came over and took my dad to the hospital. The doctor said they couldn't find anything wrong with my dad, but he was losing a lot of weight. He stayed at the hospital for a week and was still not getting any better. Before my dad was going to die, he told my mom to pick me up from school and then straight to the hospital because he wanted to talk to me. When I got to my dad, he told everyone to step out of the room because he just wanted to talk to me alone. I sat next to him and held his hand. I asked if he was feeling any better, and then a tear dropped from his eyes. He told me that he loved me and wanted to see me married someday, but told me that he wouldn't be able to, because he couldn't feel his body anymore. Then, to my horror, he told me the most scary thing in my life and made me never want to go fishing again. He explained that when he went underwater to retrieve his lure, the water was so clear that he could see everything because he was also wearing goggles. He then untangled his lure from some roots and sticks. As he looked to his right, he saw a big head. It's a creature that he's never seen before. It had whiskers and 2 big horns. It has a pointed nose and shining scales. My dad said the creature's head is as big as a semi-truck wheel, and that thing is so long. The next day, after my father told me what he saw, he passed away. My grandpa and some people believe that that thing or dragon took my dad's spirit away. Ever since then, I have never been fishing and I will never go fishing again. My father and a friend went hunting in the jungle when he was still in Laos. They were both fully prepared for a one-night hunt at the jungle. The first night went smoothly. They both got a lot of squirrel and birds, so they took out some of it and cooked it for dinner. They awoke early in the morning, and this time they decided not to separate and hunt together, because it was their last day before heading home. As they were hunting together, they came across this one river in the middle of the jungle. They were sitting next to each other and watching if there were going to be any squirrels coming to drink water. My father fell asleep while they sat and waited, then awoke to the sound of a gunshot. His friend shot a squirrel but missed it. His buddy then whispered and pointed to the squirrel, telling my dad where the squirrel was, as it was just staying still and not scared of the gunshot. My dad then pointed his gun and shot it, and it missed, but the squirrel was just as still as a rock. It didn't move at all. Then, all of a sudden, the squirrel ran and jumped into the river and disappeared. My father and his buddy looked at each other confused. Then, to their horror, they both saw a giant head slowly appearing in the water. It has the scales of a carp and the horns of a giant deer. It has water buffalo ears and a snake neck. They were both dead silent, staring into each other's eyes as the thing turned its head to look around. My father stated that the thing did not see him or his friend. The creature, or dragon, then swims around the river for about 3 minutes with its head popped up, then slowly returns to the water. They both got up and ran as fast as possible back to their campsite, packing up then leaving. They both got to their village and told the elder then, so they called a shaman to do a ritual for both of them. A week later, my dad became really sick, and all the people in his town came to see him because everyone thought that he wouldn't be able to make it. My dad slept in his bed for 2 weeks and was still breathing, but miraculously he was getting better day by day. When my dad finally fully recovered, he told my grandma that he wanted to go see his friend, but my mom looked into his eyes and said, "Son, your friend passed away." My family is now living in the United States, and my dad is now 75 years old. That is a true story of what my dad saw back in Laos. He said he still remembered the dragon's head popping up on the water like it was yesterday.